Welcome to the Kony One Studio Intro Tutorial Series. This is the Intermediate Form and Widget Creation tutorial. In this module, we will cover how to create and manage an advanced segment widget, adding widgets to a segment so that they can be populated, adding a map widget, using the event editor to manage basic navigation. The Kony Widgets palette is broken down into three sections: container widgets, basic widgets, and advanced widgets. Advanced widgets include the powerful Kony One segment view, browser, camera, map, image gallery, image strip, 3D object selector, and many more. We will start by dragging a segment widget onto the form. The Kony One segment widget is a powerful and versatile cross-platform widget that presents the user with a dynamic list of items. This dynamic list can be presented as a horizontal list view, vertical list view, or a paginated horizontal view. In this case, we will be using a vertical list view to present hospital locations. Select the segment once it has been added to the form. Select the ID and name the segment. Let's name the segment Results Segment. Under the Android properties, select Group Cells and set the value to false. The Group Cells option determines whether the segment takes up the full width of the screen or whether it groups the rows into sections. In this case, we will want it to take up the full width of the screen. Since the segment will be the only widget on this form, we will set the value of Screen Level Widget to True. This cross-platform setting provides the capability for the segment to receive very large amounts of data without sacrificing performance. If this value is set to true, no other widget may be added to the main page of the form. Now let's add a skin to the form. Let's create a simple skin with a white background for this example. We will need a container to hold all of the elements within the single row of the segment. To do so, let's start by adding an HBox. Once we have added the HBox, we will also need a VBox, since within a single row, we will have a stack of labels on the left side of the row that represents the name and address for each hospital. Let's add 3 labels to the VBox container. The first label will represent the hospital name. The next will represent the address, and the third will represent the city. Let's then add another label to the HBox, to the right of the VBox container. This will represent the distance from the user's current location. Let's add the last widget, an image widget, to the right side of the HBox container, to the right of the distance label. This will contain the chevron asset for each of the segment rows that are populated with data. Let's add an ID that is easy to recognize for each of the widgets that we added to the segment. We will need to reference these labels later from the event editor when we map the data from the web service. Now we will create skins for the labels. The skin for the hospital name will be larger and bolder than the rest of the labels. Through the skin editor, you may reference platform-specific skins for each of the available platforms. In preview mode, we notice a few issues. There is no margin to pad each of the rows, the distance labels should be on the bottom of the row, and the chevron image should be centered vertically. Select the HBox container and set the top and left margins to distance it from the row separator. And preview. Set the alignment of the image widget to middle right to center it vertically within the row. And preview. Set the right margin of the image widget to distance from the right edge of the row. And preview. Now let's see the master data for the segment using the master data editor. Typically, we would populate the data in a segment using the event editor or through LUA code. We will be using the GUI in this case to get a better idea of how the real-world data will look in the segment. Each row represents a row of data in the segment. We will set each of the rows with more realistic data and simply copy and paste to populate a scrollable segment when previewing. We see that we have better data in preview. When selecting a segment row, however, we notice that the focus skin does not look polished. Let's add a focus skin to the segment to define the touch state of the row. Let's change the background color to blue and leave the border and font properties alone. We see now in preview that the touch state is more professional. In this screen, we will toggle back and forth between the list view and a native map view of the locations. To toggle, we can either navigate to another form, or we can toggle back and forth within the same form. In this case, we will toggle within the same form. Let's start by creating an HBox container. And then drag a map widget from the Advanced Widget palette into the HBox widget. Once the map widget is placed, the studio will prompt the user to enter a map key. We will leave this blank for now. We will instead enter a map widget at the project level. To do so, right-click on the project and select Properties. Paste the map key into the Properties window. Additional documentation on how to obtain a map key for your application is available in the Kony One Studio documentation. We will now need a form footer that we will use to toggle back and forth between the list and map views. Once the HBox is added, under the Android properties, set the position to footer. This will force the position to the bottom of the device, and the content place within the HBox will not scroll with the rest of the form. Next, add a skin to the HBox. Notice that the only available background options are transparent and colors. We want an image asset as the background. Since the image property for an HBox is available only on certain platforms, we will need to fork the skin for the specific platforms. To fork the skin, expand the HBox skins in the skin palette. Then, right-click and select Fork. We are only concerned with Android for now, so select the Android platform. To edit the forked skin, double-click on the new forked version of the skin. Select the appropriate image asset for the container background. Next, add 2 button widgets to the HBox for the toggle controls. Set the labels as List and Map respectively. Let's now add a skin for each button, for both the normal state and the focused state. For each skin, we will set the background and font properties. Let's add margin to the top and bottom of each button. This will provide padding for the toggle control. Then, set the expand property for each button to false. This will ensure that the button retains only the width of the image asset within the skin. We notice in preview that the buttons are not centered in the form. This is because the widgets are only using the widget size percentage for placement. To address this, select the HBox and set the Use Widget Size Percentage to false. Then set the widget layout direction to center. Now we have a completed form build with a segment and a footer with a toggle. To toggle the visibility between each of the container widgets, we will need to add a small snippet of LUA code. LUA or JavaScript code is added in the event editor, or by adding an LUA module. To add an LUA module, right-click on the Modules section of the project and select Add Module. Name the module anything that will help you categorize the code within the file. Before we touch any code, we will need to make sure that the HBox container, the map widget, and the toggle buttons are named appropriately so that they can be referenced in the code. We will not be writing the code from scratch here, but referencing the snippet to understand how basic LUA works. We have two functions that have been created. The first function toggles to the list view, while the second toggles to the map view. Each of these functions does the following. First, it toggles the visibility of the container and map widgets. Then it toggles the skins on the button widgets from normal to focused and vice versa. Once the LUA module is created, we will reference the functions from the event editor. To do so, select the buttons and select the onClick event in the property editor. This will launch the event editor. Numerous actions and decision trees may be created in the event editor, but for now we will only be referencing an LUA function. Right-click on Action Sequence and select Invoke Function. Then, select the appropriate function that has been created in the LUA module to assign to each of the buttons when it is selected. Next, we will need to add a form navigation action to the appropriate button on the home screen. This will navigate the user from the home screen to the location's results screen. Select the Find Pharmacy button on the home screen and select the OnClick event option in the property editor. In the event editor, add a Navigate to Form action. Then simply select the form to navigate to once the widget is selected. Now we will be building the application. The build process will create the native binaries, and in the case of mobile web, the HTML5 and JavaScript. To build the project, right-click on the project and select Build Incremental. Under Phones, Native App Channel, and select Android. Once the build is complete, the Android emulator will have a green checkmark next to it. Double-click the green checkbox. This will launch the emulator in build mode. Once the application is launched, we will test the functionality. Select the Find a Pharmacy button on the home screen. This should navigate to the results screen. On the results screen, use the List Map toggle to switch between List View and Map View. Now we will build out a hospital detail form. This form will contain all of the details of the hospital that was selected in the results screen, with the capability to call the location. Create a new form and call it Result Detail. Assign the standard background skin to the form. The form will be split into two sections. The top portion will contain the hospital information and will have a separate background skin. The bottom will contain actions, in this case only one action, which will initiate a phone call to the facility. To create the top portion of the form, we will create an HBox container. Drag a new HBox onto the form. Create a new skin for the HBox, and as we did in the previous screen, fork the skin for Android, and select the appropriate asset for the background. Next, we will add an image widget to the HBox. Drag a new image widget into the container. Next, we will create a VBox container, and then add 5 label widgets to the container, which will represent the detailed information for the selected hospital. It is important at this point to select each of the labels and name them appropriately. For hospital name, address, city, state, and zip. Next, let's set our margins. Select the image widget and add a margin of 10 on the top and on the left. We will then do the same to the label widget. Next, go through each of the labels and set text on each label to get a better idea what it will look like, and set the skins using the skins that we created on the previous screen. Next, add the button to the bottom portion of the form. Then add a skin to the button for both the normal and focus states. The images are available in the Resources directory. Let's then select the source for the image widget, which will be an image of a hospital in the Resources directory. Select the button and set the margins to give it a little bit of breathing room. Let's give the button some placeholder text. This will be replaced with the phone number and a call label using string manipulation in the next tutorial. Select Preview. We have a completed hospital detail form. Open the search results form. And on the segment widget, select the OnClick event. Add a Navigate to Form action and select the Result Detail form. Now, we will build the app and see the final navigation. We have successfully built a 3-form app. In the next tutorial, we will learn how to call and map a web service, use the web service to populate the results screen, populate a map widget using an LUA table, map the hospital information from one form to the next, and use the Coney1 API to make a call on the device. This concludes the Intermediate Form and Widget Creation tutorial. For additional information on form and widget creation and other tutorials, please visit developer.coney.com.